So I'm Barbara. I am the president of Zoomedia, as Wendy said, and I'm also the newly elected chairman of the board of the Global Genes Project. So I'm honored and thrilled and a little bit nervous to take on that role, but very excited. So as this morning's been going on, I started taking notes to make this a great panel for everyone, and I ran out of notebook. There's just been so many great observations, quotes, case studies that now we're talking about technology, and all of my notes are as all over the place as the technology landscape is. On our panel today, we have three people who have. Sorry, they're telling me I'm too quiet as usual. We have three of the people who have built technology platforms, and each have a slightly different perspective and purpose. For me, as someone who originally started as a storyteller in theater, and turned into a life science geek and a technology geek, and have spent 16 years running a company that uses technology to explain science and work with both patient advocacy groups and industry to tell those stories and share the scientific information. The storytelling piece is the key part. If you can't tell the story, if you can't share the narrative, technology's not going to help you, and you're not going to be able to get what you need done. I think each of the people on the panel have started their companies and built technology platforms for very particular and personal reasons. Starting with Kyle. Kyle is the CEO of Crossroads. And we have Ben Heywood, who is the founder and president of PatientsLikeMe. And on the end, we have Amy Gleason from CareSync. Amy is the COO of CareSync. So I'm going to let each person introduce themselves. We do want to make this interactive, and we are the last panel before lunch. So we want to get the case study, let them tell you about the platforms, and then start getting into questions from the audience so you can get as much out of it as possible. So enough from me, and let's go over to Kyle.
Hi, thanks so much, Barbara. I am Kyle Brown. I'm the founder of Crossroads, and I appreciate the introduction. And the interesting thing I think that you brought up is, we're technology companies. And I think at the end of the day, I kind of wonder, is that really what you need? Is it a technology you really need? I feel like at the end of the day, what we're trying to do as a business is help rare disease communities, and even not so rare disease communities, quantify and qualify and understand better the rare disease community that you're serving. The main reason to do that is to raise visibility of your disease to researchers, pharmaceutical companies, governments, so that you can raise more donation, get more interest in research. It's not a technical solution. Technical is a enabler of being able to do this. So, I think when some people hear technology, it might scare them a bit. And really, I think what this is about is using technology in order to better understand what's going on in your space. The parting shot I'll leave you with is, pharmaceutical companies, governments, researchers, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars in research trying to bring a treatment to market. There's 7,000 rare diseases. They need to prioritize. Which ones do you think they're going to attack first? The ones that are the best quantified, best organized patient populations. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Great. My name's Ben Haywood. I'm the co-founder of PatientsLikeMe. Just real quick, this is a very personal story for me. I got into this because my brother, I lost my brother to Lou Gehrig's disease. And our family did a couple of things. We were in all of your shoes, and my brother started what's called the ALS Therapy Development Institute, which is a nonprofit biotech. Actually raised about $80 million over the last 10 years and does direct in vivo drug discovery work in ALS. It's probably the largest direct research program, disease-specific research program maybe in the world. And we're actually come from this from a very engineering perspective. We're both trained as manufacturing engineers. My dad's actually a manufacturing engineer. And so, when he ran that nonprofit, they ran 30,000 mice through that lab in the last 10 years. So they really mechanized it and made a factory of research. And so when we started PatientsLikeMe, what we wanted to do is similarly is to begin to, as Carl talked about, begin to help patients come together, enable them to quantify and understand and characterize their disease, but also get social support. So we build disease communities. We have over 250,000 patients registered in the system or across 2,000 diseases. I'm sitting next to a woman with Cushing's syndrome. We have 69 patients with Cushing's syndrome. That's not an area we've even looked at. Other diseases like MS, we have over 35,000 patients. ALS, which only has 30,000 patients in the U.S., we have over 6,000 patients. So, large-scale aggregation of patients coming together and really being their own self-advocate. And so today, actually, for any of you guys who have nonprofits or want to begin to utilize it as a way of beginning to bring a community together, you can create a nonprofit page on our site. You can actually invite patients in. We work with Global Genes around that. It's functionally an open registry for anyone who wants to join. On the back end, we are a company. The way we make money is we actually do clinical research with pharmaceutical companies. So we're actually engaging the people that you ultimately want to get today. And we have both single disease partnerships. We do research across many of our conditions. And then we have a larger across the board product that we sell into pharmaceutical companies for them to have access to all of the data and engage with patients on the platform. So that's Patients Like Me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Hi, I'm Amy Gleason, and I'm with CareSync. And my story starts on June 18th, 2010. I do remember the exact day that my daughter was diagnosed with juvenile dermatomyositis. And I had been a nurse for most of my career and done electronic medical records, worked in technology, and had seen healthcare mainly through the clinician side. And all of a sudden, I got thrust into the other side of the world where it's a lot more challenging to navigate the healthcare system. My daughter was a gymnast and a cheerleader. She could tumble like you wouldn't believe, and she went from that to not being able to ride her bike down the street. She couldn't walk up the stairs. She had a lot of different issues, missed a lot of school, etc. And we finally got a diagnosis in June, and she went from having a pediatrician and never taking anything other than an antibiotic to having 12 providers across 6 health systems, 2 out of state because they were super specialists that we saw for her disease. And quickly I realized that you have to come armed and you have to be ready, that these providers don't talk to each other. They don't have all of your complete information. You may go and have just had a study the week before. They may not have it yet. They may not trust it because it came from another place. And if you can't give them the actual report, they may not believe it. So I went about getting my daughter's medical records and tried to get all of them. And I quickly realized that's not an easy process. So I got them all, I put them in a binder, and I carried them with me. And that was not a great solution coming from somebody who built electronic medical records. So I started trying all of the systems out there. I tried different tools, different programs, and there were a lot of great things out there that helped with different pieces of the problem. But what I found is that it takes a lot of work to keep that up to date. It takes a lot of work to get all of those records. It takes a lot of work to keep them current. And then having them all in paper in a binder or having them even scanned in digitally doesn't really give you the information that you need to help you go through your journey. So CareSync was founded to help patients get through the system, get your medical records, make them meaningful, and help you have better visits with that information. So that while you're at the visit, you don't forget the questions that you had to ask. You don't leave forgetting what you learned. A lot of people forget even within a few hours what the exact instructions were. Even if you write them down, you may not be able to read them. You may have been emotional at the visit. So basically, we encourage people to come in, and for $99, we go get all of your medical records. We go back as far as your physicians have the records. Most of them keep them 7 years. Some keep them longer for pediatric patients especially. But as long as they exist, we go get them. We put those original files into our system and make them mobile, so you can take them with you anywhere, anytime. Providers have 30 days to respond to your request. So if you need your records, if you don't have them, it may take up to 30 days to get them. So we encourage people to go on, get them now, have them available. We also take those and make visit summaries. So one of the most challenging things I found is I would go to Morgan's doctor and they would say, oh, we got all these pages of information and we don't have time to read all of that. So can you just tell me what happened since you saw me last? And they're right. I mean, it could be 500 pages. They can't possibly keep up with reading all of that information. So our medical specialists go through and make appointment visit summaries. So they take just the relevant pieces of the visit, maybe some abnormal labs or different testing that was done, the assessment and plan, and a brief summary. And then we make that available for you to have it to look back when you need it and for you to share it with other people. And then we allow you to plan for visits. So nobody ever teaches you how to be a patient, that you should plan for a visit just like you plan for any other meeting. So what is it you want to get out of that visit? What are your tasks and goals? And make sure you can get those created in a way that you can then use it in the visit. And then we put voice recording into our visit manager, because a lot of times family can't go with you and they may not really understand. That's one of the things I think I learned the most through this journey is my family does have a lot of healthcare background and they supported us wholeheartedly, but they didn't really understand. And once they could hear what the doctor said and they could really get the details, then they understood. So we can voice record the doctor giving his assessment and his directions, and then my family can immediately hear that. They get a push notification that it's available. They can hear it, and they can even ask questions if they want while I'm at the visit. So that is what CareSync does.
Thank you, Amy. So maybe if I can start the questions and then we can broaden it out in the room. Given what each of you just said, every time Amy said, and then, every single point along that development from a technology perspective, that development pathway, and I know Patients Like Me, you started in one disease area and have expanded across diseases. Every time you go into the next disease, the next patient community, that's all a technology roadmap. And it all involves building process, investing in technology, and finding the platform that's already out there or reinventing a better wheel. So how would you advise organizations who are stepping into that world of, hey, we need to do social media, we need to build out a community, we even need to manage our email. How do you make the decision of where to start in a way that's going to be scalable with the organization?
I'll go. I think, as you guys, particularly as you start down this journey, there's a lot of choices about where you can spend your energy. And I think, as Barbara said really effectively, I think there are a lot of platforms out there that can get you, most of the way there that you want to get to. And you have to decide, to the point you made earlier about, should you work with a platform that exists today that really solves most of what I need, or can I do it better? And I'll be frank, if anyone really wants to spend the time and energy and try and dedicate, build a very specific platform for a very specific disease that's modeled perfectly, you probably can actually create a better platform for you and your needs. But is that the best way to spend your effort or energy? That's a question to ask. And the way I look at it is, I think what we've built out as a platform for patients and then also for nonprofits and researchers is a way that you can just get started really easily. You can create a page as a nonprofit. You can either even just go on as a patient and begin to get invite people in and aggregate them, and you have all the functionality that you would expect on a social media site. You have community. You have what you can follow other patients for updates. We have a very sophisticated technical back end with all of the medical ontologies mapped, so you can track treatments, track symptoms. We also just started a project with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to build patient-reported outcome measures more rapidly. So in your disease, if you want to help patients measure their disease in the home, like I say, in the wild, away from the doctor, you can design questionnaires. It's called the Open Research Exchange. It's funded by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we're doing our first 6 pilots this year, and next year we're going to be doing a bunch more, and we'll be looking for some patient-driven or patient-led development of patient-reported outcomes. So that, again, and those PROs can be utilized on any platform, on Kyle's or on a registry you're building or the NIH, anywhere. So, you come in and again, leverage what's out there and exists today.
You want to answer it?
I'd like to add just a little bit, and I appreciate that, and I think that one of the things that we've learned over the years in kind of the registry space is most of the people we're working with are very similar to the panel earlier today. It's a family that all of a sudden they have a child that's affected and they decide to start a foundation, and there's 2 people in the foundation and that's it. Wow, we got to help these people, and there are opportunities, right? Facebook, an obvious place to start. I think Patients Like Me does a great job on the social networking, experience sharing, and support. We do free systems as far as registries. I love your solution, by the way. I want to learn more. I think this concept of being able to cost effectively collect information and be prepared for meetings and such are great things. My only word of advice would be make sure that whatever you do, there are some level of standards and the ability to share that information with others. Because the last thing you want to do is paint yourself in a corner where you get left out of the larger collaborative efforts, you know, like sharing data with common ontologies like a GRDR or, you know, RD Connect over in Europe and some of these programs that are trying to facilitate sharing. Don't get too enamored with one solution. A lot of times it's not the solution you're looking for, it's the standards and the ability to share this information more broadly. You know, the collective voice thing, love that. I thought that was cool. Same idea when you're going into the technology space. Make sure that you're answering with a collective voice. One group that has, you know, 10% of the patient population and, you know, a registry or a website, great. What about the other 90%? You know, and if everybody's got 10% and all of the 10%ers are not collecting that data in the same manner, what have you really achieved? You've created little fragmented spaces of data. So my recommendation would be whatever solution you go with, look for standards and you know, the PROs and such, great idea. You know, there are a lot of standards bodies. My concern is over time we're going to get too many standards.
Add really quickly, I would say that the biggest thing you can do is use what people will use. So our Cure JM group that helps fund research for JM has tried at least twice since we've been in the group to start a new message board, a new community, a new area, and people are already on Facebook. They're already there, they're in it, they're there every day, and our Facebook group, despite all efforts to move them somewhere else, just won't die. So it's a great group. We learn tons from each other, share a lot of information, but sometimes you just have to go where the people are and where they want to be.
So we're just looking at questions as they come in from Twitter as well. So another great technology platform to, you know, bring something from the internet all the way in here, and we can discuss them as they come.
Is this Twitter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Am I answering this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is coming in from Heather to talking about the Open Research Exchange. So actually, it's funny. We actually, speaking of Twitter, we got one of our first research collaborators on the Open Research Exchange from a Twitter post. So you can go to the Open Research. Actually, go to www.openresearchexchange.com. And there's a form there you can put in. Again, this is we in the last 9 months we've built that platform and are just testing it with our first 6 collaborators. But next year we're looking to expand that greatly. And so just put your info in there, and you can you know, and you'll be contacted and connected with some of our researchers. And again, as I said, rolling into next year, we're looking to expand that platform and definitely want to get some really interesting patient-driven. Patient-led research projects there.
So picking up on words like open and sharing, and in the technology world, open source, certainly looking and having worked with research community and industry, and were this a room full of industry people, you know, saying, oh, let's get everyone connected on Facebook, right? It's just not going to happen, or at least it's very early days. So, you know, there's a huge gulf between the use of technology to share and to build data-rich, open access, research, and communities. This side of the table, this side of the room. Over on the industry side, there are massive data silos and IP, intellectual property issues that will lock down the rich data that we could be benefiting from. So opinions on how, or do you see a turning point now where the use of technology in the open sharing world is going to force industry to join us, or are they going to still keep their heads in the sand? Apologies to people from industry in the room, but you can you can beat me up afterwards.
I'll go. I'll give you a case study, right? I mean, Andres here, Lipid Dystrophy United, rare disease. Actually, I think the tide has turned already and is starting to turn. Bristol Myers, Squibb, AstraZeneca have partnered together, and they're funding a lipodystrophy patient registry with us. The deal is we're the only people that have access to the contact information. We're acting as the trusted third party, ensuring multiple industry partners all have access to the data equally. We're making it widely available, freely available. Researchers can access the data. It's a community-run, community-led registry. However, it's funded by industry. But the funders from industry do not have access to contact information. They have no proprietary rights over the data at all. And it's used, again, to understand what is it in this space that we need to address from a pharmaceutical standpoint in order to be able to meet my endpoints, so that if I do have a treatment, how do I ensure that that treatment's actually meeting the needs of the community? So we are seeing quite a shift in the pharmaceutical space around this concept of sharing more openly with their competitors. And, I'll just throw out another parting shot, which is when we first went into this business, we thought that the pharmaceutical companies would never want to share. And the foundations would be more than happy to share information. And we've actually found it's completely the opposite. The pharmaceutical companies have no issue sharing data. If it's de-identified, people have access to the same information, as long as it's not product specific, of course. Natural history, just understanding disease. I would argue natural history of disease is not proprietary to anybody. It's a community-led resource. So I do think the tide has shifted a bit.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think industry is moving that way. I think they still naturally want to own an exclusive data access, but on our platform, all of the data is non-exclusive. I would say our view on this is a little unique in the context of registries, because what we feel first and foremost is that the patient should be getting access to the data first. So on Patients Like Me, if you're in the system, you're sharing data, all of that is reflected back in the community, so other patients can learn from it first and foremost. And then industry is accessing it on the back end for research purposes. But again, I think why we exist is to actually engage patients in this problem and actually have them utilize the data to help them solve their problems today. Yes, a lot of what we deal with and what we want to solve is the long-term heading towards treatments, and certainly the data, as he talked about, natural histories, all that stuff, is a huge important first step, and actually you really can't get anywhere without that. And that's one of the things that the company's pharma uses our site for. But there is just living with the disease, and there's everyday things that you need that really the best source of information is other patients and how they're doing it, and that's what we set up the site to really enable.
I'll add just a couple of things. So in 1996, when I started working with electronic medical records, everybody said by the year 2000, everybody would have an electronic medical record. Here we are in 2013, and we still only have about half of the providers have an electronic medical record, going up little by little. So I think even though we've come a very long way and we have finally agreed on some of the standard medical terminology, so which terminology sets you can use to describe a problem, so that somebody calls it high blood pressure, somebody calls it hypertension, that they know those really mean the same thing. We've come a long way with all of that, but there are still a lot of privacy concerns and who has access and who governs it, who makes sure it doesn't have errors in it. A lot of sharing challenges come along the way that create these process roadblocks. So that's one of the things that we're also trying to solve, is getting all of that data for the patient across all the health systems and giving it to the patient, because the patient ultimately owns that data. In a lot of different countries, the mom keeps a book that she actually owns the medical record and takes it with her to all the visits. But here we've siloed all these different systems, and so we're trying to give that record back to the patient and let them take it from place to place and share it. And if the provider can't take it using a terminology set or any other way, then they will take a fax. Believe it or not, the fax is the most used equipment in medical industry. So you can always fax it straight to their fax machine, and they seem to believe that much more than anything else.
Just real quick, and I think, I touched on the patient-reported outcome piece, and I think as you guys think about that, I think that's actually going to be a very important part of this of fixing a lot of the problems that we're talking about today going forward. And one of the reasons is I think even in EMRs, when they're fully integrated and they all exist, there's actually not a lot of data that necessarily captures what's meaningful and different about our diseases. Just take ALS, which my brother had, and looking at Stephen Hawkins, who I think most of you guys probably know, the famous physicist. It is very likely, just from looking at them, that they have different diseases. And so, we can discover unique patient subtypes through patient-reported outcomes and then drill down to figure out the biology. And I think it's much faster and it's much easier for the people in this room to think about that as a starting point, because the biology is ultimately where we need to get to, but there's a lot we can learn from just characterizing patients and how they're dealing, how their disease is manifesting itself in the real world, that would really subtype all of the different diseases in here in a way that would be really meaningful for science.
So we're about halfway through our time. We're going to start taking questions from all of you. We'll start right here. Do we have mics to pass? Or Wendy, you can take this.
Hi, I'm Andra Stratton with Lipodystrophy United. Kyle mentioned that we do work with Patient Crossroads currently right now on developing a registry for lipodystrophy. I'd like to add that what I think is most important in our experience so far is that you continue as the patient advocate to represent the patient voice. And so somebody told me a year ago the patient should have 50% of the questions. That 50% of the questions for the registry should come from the patient. And so what I've made sure is that at least 50% cover issues we're concerned about. The doctors seem to hone in on things that they're concerned about, and they're important to us, but there are so many other things that we know that they don't know, and they're really only going to hear us if we have that data from the registry. So I can talk with doctors and say, yes, but did you know we have this? Did you know we have this? Did you know this is a trend? And they don't know. And so they need to see it in the data. So I recommend that you make sure you push that. And then I just want to link the two talks in collaboration. I'm going to put this out there for you. It's incredibly important for us to have a lipodystrophy-specific registry. However, I think there would be a huge benefit in our community joining something like Patients Like Me so that we can see trends for other symptoms, because I really think that's the only way we're going to start. You have a very similar symptom as we have, but I didn't know that until just now. So who has insatiable hunger? Who has, this? Who has that? Patients Like Me can help with that. So how can you both collaborate? And then your product is phenomenal. So in building a registry, could I use your data? When I join and have all my medical records available to me, could I then sync that to the registry? Because the registry wants to know what is my data, what's my recent test result. Can I easily just sync that? So I'll let you all collaborate on that.
And actually, just to follow up on that just a little bit, as you guys talk up there, I used to run a company that did e-commerce fraud management. And the way we did it is we actually got all the big banks and e-commerce companies to work together and share data to stop fraud. So it was a very simple idea. Hey, if we just share information, we could stop the fraud. But it was very difficult to get all the large companies to work together. But we ended up doing it, Visa, MasterCard, all the rest. But to your point, the only thing that moved the needle, so if we collectively feel that there is a need to get the vendors to work together, the only thing that moved the needle was actually the patient population. So they can tell us, this is the theoretical benefit, this is theoretically how we could do it, but it's going to be very difficult for them to spend time and money and energy to do that unless there's a clear need and demonstrated benefit that's driven by the community. Say, we actually want you to do this, And that's what will move the needle.
Oh, you know what? Oh, real quick, I just wanted to plug something in if I'm allowed to, because he had said ALS quite a few times. Tomorrow there's a walk for the Guardian Angels in San Juan Capistrano at 9 o'clock. So if anybody wants to come to that, they can get the address from me. My friend Corey was diagnosed at 28 years old with ALS, and so I'm going to be doing the walk tomorrow at 9 a.m. So I just wanted to plug that in. I wanted to be an advocate because he had said that a couple different times, and I couldn't just sit here and not say anything. So 9 a.m. tomorrow.
And I wanted to say, as a benefactor of Duchenne Connect, Mr. Kyle Brown, we are entering into a lot of clinical trials right now, and there is no way we could be doing what we're doing without Duchenne Connect. I think we started in 2008 with you. It's a very robust patient registry now, and it's making all the difference in the world now that we are getting to the point where we're going into trials for treatment. So thank you.
All right, we got a question in from Twitter from Heather to ask you guys to please clarify or explain exactly what a registry is.
Well, I mean, quite frankly, the simple answer is it's a list of patients. You can go. I mean, the most basic form of it is a list of patients. And to your point about where you're at with Duchenne's, if you're thinking about this, with some longer horizon, because as we've learned this morning, this is not a fast journey. Just having a list of patients is a huge starting point, and then the next step up is okay. How do you begin to put a systematic medical data collection architecture behind it, like Patient Crossroads or Patients Like Me, and think about that, and then moving on and continuing on up that journey in terms of quantifying and understanding the disease. So, I mean, but again, I think the simplest form is it's just a list of patients.
I think there is a lot of confusion around this term registry, quite frankly, and there's different kinds of registries. There's product registries that pharmaceutical companies have to run. There's, clinical registries that researchers are going to operate. There's what I would call natural history registries or disease registries, which is kind of more the space we play in. I think registry is becoming kind of like, Kleenex, right? I mean, it's this generic term for lots of different things, and it's confusing, I think, in the space right now. I think there's a lot of confusion. I totally agree. I think somehow it's an organized list of patients and maybe extended family members, and being able to contact these folks and learn from them at the end of the day, I believe is what you need to accomplish. I would be cautious about going too far down, like we're doing a research registry. That's a whole different ball game, and that's a longer term thing, and it's a lot more costly. I think there's things like Patients Like Me and Patient Crossroads and CareSync that you can do out of the box tomorrow, that cost little, if anything, that you can get started. I can't tell you how many groups we've worked with that have, they agonize over the decision to move into a registry for months, if not years. And I would argue that, sure, you need to make a decision, but I think getting started is half the battle, quite frankly.
Just one comment on that. Many years ago, about 5 years ago, I had a conversation with someone who'd been building out patient community. And he completely threw out the idea that a patient community was one destination because of Google. And he had this thought that the internet is one big community, and if you treat it as such, then the concept of registries becomes everyone who's connected within your disease or research area who's online, right? So the registry suddenly becomes something much, much bigger, which from an undiagnosed perspective, I think is important. If you can't build a registry because you don't have a diagnosis to build it around, you can still have a registry because there are things like CrowdMed, platforms where you can put cases, medical cases that have not been solved, and have not just medical practitioners and healthcare providers look at those, but also members of the community. And you know, I'm a member, and I can go in and say, you know, that woman to me sounds like she might have Cushing's, right? And I can put that up there on CrowdMed, and you know, if that hasn't been part of her diagnosis to date, she's able to take that back as a suggestion to the care community. So I think the internet as a world that we all live in can be used in powerful ways that take us outside of the terms and the silos that we might be used to. And you know, the word registry has all kinds of structural connotations to it that we don't really have to live with if we don't choose to.
I'd like to add a comment. I agree with everything you're saying from basic registries. We actually have a registry. I'm the executive director of the Fibromuscular Dysplasia Society, and we partnered with MCOR through the University of Michigan. And the way our registry works, it's a patient registry. Patients sign a consent to participate, and then they're seen at one of the centers. We've identified, we've got 14 centers throughout the U.S. working with us right now. And so it's the physicians that are inputting the data. One, we find that with our registry, it's a little more accurate, the data that's going in. So just like you were talking about hypertension versus high blood pressure, the terminology, you know, how a patient may understand it, or, you know, is an aneurysm, there's a true aneurysm or a false aneurysm, you know, what is it? So what we've been able to do with our registry, we're up to almost 1,000 patients in it, is we're now producing data from it, and it's being published. So about 5 or 6 years ago, they believed that 75% of the cases of fibromuscular dysplasia were in the renal arteries. Well, now we know we have just as many cerebral vascular cases, and patients are having strokes from the disease. So we're actually learning, we're publishing the data, we're educating physicians. As you said, it's more expensive, and that's one of our biggest hurdles is funding the registry. So it's just a different perspective on how a registry can work. And with our rare disease, there is no known cause or cure. So we're hoping by this information that's coming from the registry that one day we will be able to set protocols. It's hard for us to get funding, and we can't say everyone's on aspirin. We can't say everyone you know, is going to have this treatment option, because we don't know that, but that's what this data is going to help us sort through.
Towards the back of the room, if we have a mic back there.
Hi, this is my favorite subject because it's been my life for the last 2.5 years. We have a registry. It works great for us. Every disease is different. Patient communities are different. The more rare it is, the more motivated the patients are to go to the nth extent to answer questions. I want to reiterate what has been said. You need to know what you're trying to get out of this. Is this something that's going to be validated enough for researchers to publish on? Or is this something so that you can email people about a clinical trial? I mean, there's contact information, and there's very specific medical information. What we have is probably a hybrid. We ask a lot of questions, and we're getting away with it, but we are realizing we need to cut some out. Earlier today, we talked about collaboration. Our disease is Phelan-McDermid syndrome. It's a chromosome deletion. It has nothing whatsoever to do with Duchenne. I don't know if we have any similarities. Our registry was built on what Duchenne did, because we steal things from people, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So if you're doing something, ask around. This is a very confusing space, and there's not just one answer for everybody. It's usually what can you afford to do? And you're going to make concessions if you can't afford to do certain things. The other thing I wanted to point out was that we underestimated the importance of this for the families. It is all about the patient, and our families go in, they answer 200 questions, they click on a pie chart, and they take their chart to their doctor and say, 60% of these kids have silent reflux. Do the test. They believe the chart, they don't believe the mother. And we didn't have to wait for something to get published by a researcher and go in PubMed. We just used the registry data. And I think that, you know, that returning that information, how many people have answered questionnaires and never saw where their answer was? So immediately you're getting something that the patient gets good for you. You answered 200 questions. You get to see how everybody else answered it. And I think that's really empowering. It helps you make better medical decisions. And it's helped me in an IEP meeting get a one-to-one for my child, because I can prove that 80% of our families don't feel pain, or kids don't feel pain. So, and my last point would be, there was questions that we didn't have in our registry, and the two groups that pointed out this question were not our families. A pharmaceutical company asked me to ask this question, and an NIH researcher asked me to ask this question. And the question is now the first question, or will be the first question in our registry. What are the 3 most important things to you? That's a quality of life question that wasn't in our registry, and we didn't think to ask it. Researchers and pharmaceutical companies want to know, what is it that weighs on you the most about your disease or your child's disease? And I think that that's important. And I think, you know, when we see something on Facebook about a new symptom, and we see it enough and there's a long conversation, we call our vendor and we say, we have a new question, because it's really important to our families. So I'm just preaching to the choir, I know, but I just wanted to share some positive, you know, experience.
Hi, my name is Tamara, and fortunately, I am very fortunate that my children are very healthy, and it's me that's the patient. I have a pretty much invisible disease, multiple sclerosis. Many of you might be familiar with it, and I am a member of Patients Like Me. I wish that I had been able to find Patients Like Me before I got my diagnosis. I was in the hospital in May of 2009. I went from being at work at the top of my game, planning a huge open house from people coming in all over the country to the Washington, D.C. area, and the next day I was in the hospital numb from my neck down and never could return to work. I went to many doctors, and I was told everything from I'm imagining all my symptoms, they're all in my head. I can't possibly have MS because I was a 40-year-old woman at that time. MS doesn't cause pain. And getting into the group with the other patients, and I love the pie chart that you were talking about, because when I can tell someone, you know what, MS sure as heck does cause pain, and let me tell you about this pain. And people come on and they go, I am having pain and my doctor said that MS doesn't cause pain. That pie chart would be, if you could collaborate with her, that would be a phenomenal thing to be able, I mean, I know that we can click on it and see that so many people are having this symptom, but if we could click and see, you know, 90% of people with MS say they're having pain, so why are all these neurologists saying it doesn't cause pain? The other thing that I wanted to mention is being your own advocate. And I learned this the really hard way, and now I am very staunch and very vocal. And somebody had mentioned, if your doctor won't do this test, change your doctor. I cannot emphasize how important that is. Those doctors work for you. You are the boss. You are the one paying them, even if it is through your insurance company doing the most of it. That's just somebody handling finances. You are the one that's in charge, and if that doctor cannot handle that, lose them. And I am to the point now that I tell doctors flat out. When we moved from Washington, D.C. to Bakersfield a few years ago, and we just relocated, and I get to do this again, I tell them flat out, this is your job interview. I am looking for members to be on my medical team to treat my multiple sclerosis. This is what I need. And I list out what, and you know, where you're talking about what is it that you want? What is it you want from that doctor? I want a doctor who understands that this is the most important thing to me. I understand that he has how many ever patients, and I'm this much of his, you know, but in my life, I'm on disability. I have all day to research something. And these guys that work, these folks that work at PLM, they can tell you how much we research for ourselves and we share. Has anybody else read this? Has anybody seen this? Does anybody have, you know, strange little symptoms that you know, I could have had them my whole life, and I don't know. But all of a sudden, there's 25 other people that I'm talking to in a conversation, and they all have it too. And I can go to that doctor and say, and I do exactly say verbatim, I have all day to research. If I bring something, I want it taken seriously. And I tell you what, you will find out faster than anything a doctor's attitude if you tell them it's their job interview. I've had doctors tell me, I'm the one who asked the questions. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'll keep your resume on file in case we have any openings, but you're not the candidate I'm looking for right now. That being said, PLM, I got to make sure I did that right. Yeah, because there's PML, which is a whole different thing. One's deadly, one's not. I cannot recommend it enough. And my question for you at the nonprofit end of things and collaborating is, what do you do, say, for multiple sclerosis? There is a lot of angst in the MS society, in the MS patient group about, let's say, the National MS Society and where their funds go. So how can, or do you have experience that you could share on changing the direction of these huge national groups and where their money is going and what they're funding from our little teeny peon groups?
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, look, I mean, I know a lot of people here have started small nonprofits, but you know, it's a $20 billion a year industry, the disease advocacy realm, and so there are a lot of dollars being aggregated in various ways. And again, much like advocating for yourself in your or your loved one in your individual care, you need to, and much like the guy from the federal government here today, we need to advocate, and they're looking for advocacy because it helps them prioritize. Same thing, stand up, one voice, tell them what you want, and you can help move the agenda. I mean, that's the point of aggregating and bringing patients together in a collective voice. And I think it's about. It's not just about narratives and stories. They're very powerful. You need to do that. It's about quantifying, as we've heard today, the patient experience in a meaningful way, so that can also influence it in an aggregated way.
I think part of that too is, if you're going to go to a doctor, if you're going to go to a pharmaceutical company and bring part of your story and data with you, think about how technology can help you share that in a way that they can hear it. Right, so going back to that pie chart, every pharma biotech company, they love pie charts, right? It's an easy way to see the data, right? Google Graphs is out there, and you can put data into it and get beautiful pie charts, and the technology can enable you to do that. So tell the story, but tell it in multiple languages, so everybody you need to hear it can.
That's a great point. One of the things that we've also found is that a lot of times you've been thinking about your visit for a long time. You may have thought about it for a week, a month, several months, and your doctor just thought about it when you raised it to them. So you may walk in and throw all of this stuff on them, and they may not know. And so if you can give them the information before the visit, that's also a great tool. So with CareSync, we allow you to fax over a visit summary the day before or 2 days before of the things you want to get out of the visit. And we found that also really helps, because now they're in the right frame of mind. They've had time to absorb it and think about it.
I know that traditional Chinese medicine, in dealing with my own mental illness, I learned that there's much to be learned about traditional Chinese medicine. And the analogy is that the doctor is paid when the patient is well and not paid when he's not. And which means that I now connect with the doctor. I met with her for an hour the first time. She took notes and I talked. So it's a critical thing to look at that paradigm versus compliance, because that's how we were raised. We're not compliant. We need to change the paradigm of the current medical system so that they see us as a whole entity, not as a kidney or a knee or a brain, but as a person with a heart and soul.
You know,
I'd like to add one
So-
thing to that, too. I'm sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Amy.
I also, one of the big things that we've really found too is that families can really give that full picture. So my daughter was just in the hospital and I told her story 14 times to people in the first 4 hours, from the nurses, residents, the different providers. And I realized quickly that if I wrote it down, then my husband had things that he corrected or added to, and Morgan added things that she corrected or added to. So you can also get a better picture when everybody helps tell the story.
And actually, just lastly in that realm, I mean, I think as we're moving from a fee-for-service to a pay-for-performance, which is a more capitalistic way of saying what you said, but I mean, I think, you know, we've talked a lot about advancing the disease knowledge through registries, and I think that's very important, and it's actually on some level fundamentally why we started Patients Like Me. But I think as importantly as treatments come online for your disease, showing the improvement in the quality of life, not just and other meaningful patient measures, is going to drive reimbursement as much as moving biological markers, and pharma is significantly looking at that and realizing that. And so again, registries such as the one we're talking about, and what it sounds like a lot of you guys have already made huge inroads on, are going to be a big part of that as well.
So I think we're wrapping up. We're out of time. I'm sure everybody is hungry, and continue the conversation over lunch. We're all available to you for the rest of the day if you have more technology questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.